Welcome back to Deviatus. This week we are concluding Season 2 of the show. I have some important announcements I'd like to make at the end of the episode about the future of the show, so don't go anywhere after the main content, and I would love to get your input with a couple of things. There's no guest for today's show, but before I get to any of the news I'm asking for input about, I wanted to hold up my end of a promise that I made 1 year ago now on the show. Whether you've been listening that long or not, I had created a Halloween special for episode 15 back in 2016 that focused on some EVPs I collected utilizing a spirit box. And I concurrently ran an anonymous survey alongside the episode to obtain some unbiased opinions about what words, if any, could be deciphered within those audio clips. Now, before anyone listening decides to email me about how to conduct proper research and eliminate bias, I am fully aware that the survey I ran has some limitations. In fact, I believe one of the most difficult challenges that paranormal researchers face is conducting experiments and research in controlled conditions and coming up with creative ways to prevent bias. Obviously, there's going to be some level of bias if I'm reaching out to people who listen to a show about the paranormal, and that if you're listening, you're more than likely to, number one, already believe in the paranormal, and two, automatically assume that any voices captured are in fact the voices of a ghost, spirit, or otherwise non-living entity, however you prefer to describe it. The very definition of these specific terms can be up for debate. So with that said, I am not attempting to pass this survey off as official scientific research. I did complete the survey strictly for entertainment purposes and to see if random people I have never met in person may have heard the same vocalizations that I interpreted from the files. So if you haven't listened to episode 15, that's okay, because I'm not only going to explain how the survey went and the structure of that episode was, but I'm also going to replay those audio clips for you today. Just as some background, I had shared some audio recordings from the controversial paranormal investigation technique utilizing the SB7 Spirit Box. I've used this device quite a few times with some varying results, and on episode 15, I didn't really share my own opinion about the authenticity of those results, but I'll swing back around at the end and let you know my thoughts. Of course, I always challenge you, the listener, to form your own opinions, regardless of whether you agree with me or not. In order to make your own informed decision, I feel like it's only fair to explain how the device works, as well as what criticism skeptics have for its use, which I summarized in episode 15, but again, I want this to be a standalone episode here, so you don't have to go back and listen to that one. I'll also explain how I've attempted to avoid the circumstances that skeptics use to debunk the voices heard through this device for my experiment. So the Spirit Box is basically like a radio. It scans through radio frequencies just like your tuner in your car's audio system. It can be set to scan frequencies at different time intervals. All of the recordings that you're going to hear in this episode have been set to scan at 250 milliseconds. This means the radio station you're audibly hearing changes 4 times every second. When you think about how many words could possibly come out of your mouth in a whole second when you're speaking normally, then compare that to how many words might come out of your mouth in 1/4 that time, you may be lucky to get one whole syllable out of your mouth in a 1/4 second. Keeping that in mind, we know different radio frequencies already have voices coming through them that should be different people speaking with each of the scanned frequencies. And there may be some gaps in normal radio speech heard when the Spirit Box scans through frequency bands that don't have anything broadcasting. But for argument's sake, and to remove possibility of doubt, let's pretend every frequency has audible speech while scanning so that we expect to hear a voice each 1/4 of a second. Each frequency should still have a different person's voice heard through the speaker. Eventually, you may have combinations of speech from multiple voices that sometimes sound like words when kind of strung together, but just with different voices. Here's an audio clip so you can hear what the SB7 Spirit Box sounds like without any suspected voice phenomena. If I play the clip multiple times looped over, you may or may not pick up on parts of words, but certainly no one is speaking through multiple scans in any distinguishable attempt to communicate. So with all of that in mind, it may be possible to regularly hear single-syllable words from time to time from one voice. It's tough to tell whether or not a single syllable can be distinguished as not coming through a normal radio program. For example, listen to this clip.
Hello? 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 Hello?
This is an example of clear vocalization of a word, but for a very short time, and it's difficult to ascertain just by listening if what is heard lasts longer than the duration of a frequency scan. I did analyze the amount of time the word was spoken in Adobe Audition and was able to determine that these 2 syllables lasted nearly 2 frequency cycles, or a half a second. It's still probably not the strongest evidence. We tend to throw out examples like these because they don't meet all of our criteria. What I tend to look for is multiple syllables coming through the same voice and spanning multiple frequency scans. The longer the better. If you can hear a whole sentence, that's considered far more compelling than just 2 syllables. The most compelling argument against these kinds of clips made by skeptics is that your brain is perceiving what answers to expect. In other words, it's a form of audio pareidolia, where the brain assigns recognizable patterns to gibberish. While extreme skeptics maintain that 100% of these EVPs are caused by pareidolia, you have to also consider the context of the words coming through. In other words, do the EVPs sound like direct answers to questions asked by investigators? And do they follow within a reasonable amount of time following the question in order to be considered a potential response? So in my original survey, I played the devil's advocate by providing half the audio examples as what I call a blind option, meaning that the first 4 out of the 8 clips I shared, I didn't provide any context about what was said prior to the clip or any information about what questions were asked, but simply played the recording and asked for opinions about what was being said. For the last 4 clips, I did provide a little bit of context. I personally think it added a level of credibility to what you hear, but for those extreme skeptics listening, I provided both just to eliminate some possibility of bias towards a perceived response. Before I play through the clips, I want to make one final comment on listening to EVPs. As you are hearing this now as part of the Deviatus podcast, you're listening to a compressed version of the audio files in MP3 formatting. As it is, I would highly recommend using headphones while in a quiet room. But better yet, I will post the links to my uncompressed files in WAV format in the show notes at deviatus.com, which have much higher audio quality, and the difference is definitely noticeable. Now I'm going to play through each of these 8 clips recorded from the SB7 Spirit Box. I'll start by playing each clip 3 times so that you can hear and form your own opinion about the words that you're hearing, or if you hear anything at all. Then I'll explain a little bit about the clip and play it again. I'll also let you know the results of the survey about these clips. Just for the record, the same question was asked after each clip was listened to, which was, did you hear a discernible voice? And if so, write what you thought it said. If not, leave it blank. If unsure, please type unsure. Let's listen to the first clip. Now this was an immediate response after someone asked the question, what happened to you? I thought it said, taken advantage. Responses on the survey include the name Nolan. A few people thought it said none or now, and a few people said they were unsure. One person stated that they heard the word advantage. It's a pretty wide range of responses for sure. Now let's listen to the second clip. This clip was a direct response to the question, would anyone here like to speak with us? I thought it said, wanna chit chat? The survey indicated 3 people heard wanna chit chat and a couple weren't sure. 2 people heard the word dark, and another heard you're a dork. One person even heard I'm hurt. Here's another interesting clip. A group of us thought we heard responses coming through that weren't really clear, so we continued to ask questions, and what I thought it said was, I said leave. The survey responses had multiple results. People heard just leave, simply, exactly, sickly, stigly, S-T-I-G-L-Y, and complete. One person wasn't sure. I think you can kind of see where we're going here. Some of these responses don't match up, and a few of them do. Let's move on to the next clip. This one is the last of the blinded examples, and we had been speaking with what sounded like a woman in distress in various locations in EVPs without the spirit box, as well as within live listening, which was also through the spirit box. This one was one of the more clearly recorded clips, and I thought it said, help me. Responses from the survey include 3 people confirming help me, 1 person says guilty, and 1 more person said they heard paranormal investigation. 3 people were unsure what they heard. Okay, let's listen to clip number 5, which was the first one that I provided a little bit of context for. A couple of voices had been coming through, and someone live listening mentioned hearing the word fire, which was pretty clear, but being only 1 syllable, a follow-up question was asked. Are you a firefighter? This was the response. Now, I personally thought it said, I'm a painter. People who took the survey said, trying to take her, I am a tanker, sign of tantered, trying to plant dirt, in the 23rd, firefighter, and 2 people said they were unsure. Clip 6 immediately followed the previous capture, and just to be safe, I put an explicit content warning on this episode if it says what I think it says. Let's take a listen. After the last response where someone says, are you a firefighter? And we get the response that sounded like, I'm a painter, to me at least, a member of the group who I'm guessing didn't interpret the previous response the same way I did, pulled out a cigarette lighter and asked, what do you think of this? To me, it sounds like the response says, go fuck yourself. One person on the survey says, go back in, and mentioned it kind of gave them chills and made their eyes water. 3 people thought it said, don't like it. Other interpretations include, it needs to leave, no smoking. 2 people heard the word ghost, and 1 person was unsure. Got just a couple more clips to go through. This is another interesting clip that could be in direct response to what we were saying. We were finishing up a session, thanking them for communicating with us, and said that we would be back with another group of people. Here was the response. See, to me, this one sounds like it says, from out of nowhere? According to survey results, they included the word nowhere or out and nowhere. A couple of people said they heard help or how. 4 people weren't sure this time. In this final clip, I need to explain one of the questions we commonly ask is, what is your name? And sometimes when we don't receive a response, an alternative question we ask is, can you tell us the name of someone here? Here's the response we received.
I don't even know what political was. I don't even know what political was. I don't even know what political was.
To me, it sounds like Stan Thompson, which happens to be the name of the president of San Diego Paranormal Eye, who was present that night. I'm going to play it again.
I don't even know what political was. I don't even know what political was.
The survey results on this one seemed random. One person said, "Need help, I don't even know what political was." Another one said, "I don't even know of political roles." And another said, "I don't even know a political word." Other responses include political rows, no words, can't help, and word. 2 people were unsure still.
I don't even know what political was.
So after hearing all these clips on the original survey, there were 2 additional questions. The first was, do you believe the SB7 spirit box is beneficial to paranormal investigation? Out of 11 responders, 3 people said yes, 4 said no, and 4 selected other. There was a comment box option. One person says yes/no. It often feels too random or just convenient, almost like it generates random sentences or a word off radio. Another one of the comments says, while I don't deny that results can be gathered using a spirit box, I do not think that they hold many advantages over standard voice recorders. Additionally, I am unsure how to feel about the methodology of this device as it produces false positives. The third response says, open-minded but skeptical. And our final text response for this question says, I've heard them used before, and I feel sometimes they may be picking up other radio waves, such as radio, wireless. And then the last question on my survey was, do you enjoy hearing EVPs and real-life evidence on the Deviatus podcast? 8 people said, hell yeah, give me more. 2 people said, bleh. 1 person said, not a listener to your cast, and left his Reddit username. So I just want to discuss some of the highlights and vulnerabilities about the survey and the responses collected before moving on to the next topic. As you've heard, there are often some very drastic differences between what I thought some of the clips said and what others believe they say. Some clips had more similar responses than others, but the best case scenario for these clips was that nearly half the people who took the survey heard something very similar to what I heard. Whether you're approaching this from a scientific standpoint or a statistical analysis as a believer, I have to keep it real and kind of say it's not going to be significant enough to derive a firm conclusion that people are hearing the same thing. I do think, however, that if 50% of people believe there is something being said that sounds similar, that's statistically significant enough to at least warrant further investigation and testing. Another issue with this kind of survey is what statisticians would call the N number, or the number of people taking the survey. The more people you have taking the survey, the more significant your results are going to be. Only having 11 people take this survey is nowhere near the number of people probably required to hold any weight. Ideally, you'd want at least 100 people, if not thousands. When this survey was launched with episode 15, I was averaging maybe 200 downloads per week, probably 50 to 60 downloads per episode. That's compared to my over 2,000 downloads per week now and maybe 1,500 downloads per episode today. But while this show has seen a lot of increase in downloads, it's still relatively small compared to some of these shows that have tens or hundreds or thousands of downloads per month. I may just need to hold off a little while before I commit to running another survey like this. That is, unless it's for pure entertainment. One final problem worthy of mentioning, among a few others, is I have no way of confirming whether listening conditions are similar to those that I utilized in a quiet room with headphones compared to those people taking the survey. If you're going to really reduce the variables and provide repeatable observation, each experience should be identical or as close as possible. The ideal situation would be to have people listen to the same audio file quality with the same headphones on the same computer at the same volume setting. I'm sure I could hang out at my local mall with a laptop and a set of headphones and survey random passersby to accomplish this, provided I should find a quiet place to sit and have them listen. But that's a task I didn't choose to take this time around. So without what people would call concrete proof that there's anything to these spirit boxes, it all comes down to personal opinion. Personally, I find it very difficult to hear many words caught through a spirit box in real time unless I'm wearing headphones with the volume really high. Others around me seem to be able to have the ability to hear and interpret conversations I simply can't. That doesn't necessarily mean I do or don't believe what they're saying, but perhaps it's more of an acquired skill or something that just requires practice to gain some level of competency at. And I'm just not there yet. Most of the clips that you heard today were listened to after the investigations took place, and my opinions were formed by re-listening to the audio, except for a couple of them. I often find that when anyone's using these devices on television, I don't catch the words in real time then either, but only when the show tells you what they think it says after the replay. I have to say, I agree with some of the survey responses that question the authenticity of the results. On one hand, I do believe there are examples of when these have been used in real time to communicate, but I believe they're probably far more rare than television would have you believe. I prefer an audio recorder with simple Q&A without the assistance of additional electronics. If you can catch a voice other than your own in complete silence, to me that's way more compelling. Either way, I'm open to continue using the spirit boxes in future investigations. You just never know what you're going to catch or when, and it definitely helps to keep a skeptical approach. I would love to hear your opinions about any of these clips or spirit boxes in general. If you have your own clips to share, I'd really be excited to hear those too. At this point, I want to have an open, honest conversation with you about the future of the show. And in order to do that, I believe we need to visit the origin of the show and why I started this podcast in the first place. I started Deviatus for two simple reasons. Number one, having experienced the paranormal myself, I wanted to connect with others that had too, free of judgment and ridicule that so often accompany the experience of sharing these stories. Number two, because paranormal topics are just interesting to me. I've been educated with a scientific and healthcare-related background which simply cannot provide an explanation for some of my experiences, and that idea intrigues me. I believe we as a human race need to push our boundaries of understanding and to avoid being so pig-headed and lazy about looking into phenomena that so many people report yet remain ignored or don't get taken seriously. Over the past 15 months, I brought you 40 episodes of Deviatus with guests experiencing a plethora of strange things, from UFO encounters to cryptids, ghosts, demons, near-death experiences, and a few others. The truth is, I love the content. It just doesn't get old to me. I, however, unlike the content I share with you, have been burning the candle at both ends. Basically, I'm announcing that I need to take a little break, and I'll be putting the show on hiatus for a little while. I feel like I owe you a bit of an explanation about my reasoning behind this decision, though. While I've shared some aspects of my life throughout the episodes, I can provide a few additional details here. I do work full-time in healthcare management during the week. I also teach radiography courses in the evenings for secondary income. And for the fall semester, which is going on now, I've taken on an additional course load to help out due to some faculty changes at the school. On top of that, I was asked to serve for the last several months as an expert consultant for a legal case involving my field of expertise in radiology. Well, that just ended, but there may be an additional opportunity there in the near future. I also have a wife and 2 children who have been gracious enough to split their shared time with me and my podcasting on the weekends and evenings when I'm not teaching. While I really enjoy still producing the podcast, my ideal goal would be to make it a weekly show. That is, if I could have an ideal state. I can honestly tell you I'm struggling right now to continue a production schedule of just every 2 weeks. Podcasting is a ton of work that a producer can sink hours and days, along with many dollars, into each month. I never intended to make money off the podcast, so that's why you've never heard me speak of Patreon, ask for donations, or why I don't place advertisements on the show. And I'm not asking now. I'm saying all this not to complain, but to just shed a little light for the listeners who've been so supportive of the show. I don't want to simply disappear for a little while like so many shows do without an explanation or any notification about whether the show will return or not. I'm going to be totally transparent right now and say I'm not 100% sure about when the show will return. I think there's going to need to be some solid changes to the show in order for me to keep producing Deviatus, though. First and foremost, I'm learning that I just can't do it all by myself. I'm going to be searching for a partner in crime, or possibly two, to share the responsibilities of show production while I'm on hiatus. From coordinating guests for the show, to participating in interviews, to post-production, scheduling, and social media. I do need help there. I want to continue producing a show with integrity, meaning asking questions to seek the truth, while being careful not to indulge personal opinions too much, as long as I'm allowing room for the listener to make up their own minds about the content being shared. There's certainly no shortage of content for a show like this, and I've got plenty of passion about the topic. But the truth is, the logistics are a bitch when you're a one-man show with a busy schedule. So that's what I'm doing today. I'm going to keep the website going and the iTunes feed live while I sort through my options and make some decisions on this hiatus. I don't see life getting any less busy for me in the near future, but I do see things becoming more manageable in early 2018 with strong potential to continue the show with the right kind of help. I figure, what better place to look for that help than with my listeners? If you think you want to participate and you have the time and drive to help me out, feel free to shoot me an email and we can set up a time to chat at deviatuspod@gmail.com. In the meantime, I'll still be on social medias at deviatuspod, on Twitter and Instagram. I'm also on Facebook and YouTube. I am truly looking for a person or people who are passionate about this topic. You're going to need to be, because I can't pay you. If you've listened this far, just want to say thank you. I've gotten a really solid fan base already, and I've made a lot of great relationships throughout this show. And I hate to disappoint anyone, but I just thought I'd come out and be completely transparent with you. Thank you again so much for your support. I'll post an update when I have more information. You probably won't hear much from me until 2018 unless it's my random comments on social media. So until next time, take care.